Okay, here we are again, and this time we're going to talk about how to work with selection areas, how to create a selection, how to add to it, and I want you to keep in mind that the metaphor for this kind of work is the idea of masking something off, like you're taking out your X-Acto knife and you're cutting like as if you were going to collage something, or you were going to cut an area so that you could airbrush or paint within that area and not have it go outside of the lines that you have pre-designated. So it's a way of controlling what you're doing, and it's a way of selecting essentially what you're doing down to the pixel. That's an important idea, is that unlike Illustrator, Photoshop is basically based on the pixel. Illustrator is based entirely on the idea of the vector, the path, the Bezier curve. And down in Photoshop, if you look at this image that, by the way, we're looking at this pretty image of Candy. I thought I wanted to do some kind of a mural thought or idea related to Candy. I have my eye on the Weatherly Building, which is a candy factory downtown, a former candy factory that's currently being renovated. They're very interested in getting a new mural there, and the idea of candy and the metaphor being eye candy for the city was an attractive one to me. So look, in this case here, I'm just picking up the idea. Basically what I'm kind of doing is photographic sketching, and I'm looking at these images of Cadbury rose candy. I want to separate some of these and bring them into a different context where I can overlay them onto an existing building. I'm hoping to get a better image of the Weatherly Building, but this is what, for this tutorial, we're just working with selections, copying and pasting, adding and subtracting to selections, and different methods for making selections. So first, I'm going to go over to the toolbar over here, and I'm going to select the lasso tool. The lasso tool, if you see this video that's playing in the corner there, it shows you that as you draw, essentially, it cordons off certain pixels. So I'm pulling it out, and I'm picking this blue candy, and I'm going to select this one out of the video, out of the photograph that we have here. I start to draw on the edge. I tend to bury my lines a little bit into the edge, and that helps eliminate pixels that I don't want. When I get to the edge of the image, it just will go straight no matter what I do, so I just hurry up and go past that. I went around one section of it, and then you're working, if you're drawing with a mouse, you need to be careful not to hold that mouse down too long. So I've only got, you can see the ants moving around here. I'll zoom in on this. You can see the ants moving around here on this selection area. By the way, zooming in is a really good idea. To zoom, I just hit Z, and I can zoom in by dragging to the right, or zoom out by dragging to the left. H is a nice quick key. I love the quick keys because it makes it so that I get to look at the artwork and not think about menus and pull downs and all that kind of stuff. Now you'll notice I selected a little bit and I didn't get it all. So if I want to add to my selection, it's much like adding to any other selection that you would use. I'm holding down Shift, and I'm going to hit the lasso tool again. I'm going to hold down Shift, and you'll see, if you look at the cursor closely, if you can see it, what happens when you hold down Shift, the cursor turns into a lasso with a plus sign and allows me to select more. And so, that's working out pretty well. I could continue selecting like this. I am noticing that on some of these larger curves that I'm having a little bit of trouble holding the curve exactly the way I would like it to come out. And I'm getting kind of a chip-choppy pixel sort of thing happening here. So by the way, and I'll demonstrate this, if you can see, I can add to a selection by just holding down Shift, but I can also, like, let's say that I make a mistake. I go outside of my area. Oh no, I got out here and I selected too much. If I hold down Option, it turns the lasso into a lasso with the minus symbol next to it. And this will allow me to remove some of the selection area. Like that. So you can basically clean up your work. Now, I'm going to, because this is a short tutorial, I'm going to jump to one of my favorite techniques, which gives me a lot of control. I mentioned in the last tutorial that if you used paths in Illustrator, you should be good with paths in Photoshop. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go over here Oh boy, you know it's interesting. I go to look for the menus and they've changed the icons a little bit. I am so used to the quick key for it. What do you think the quick key for a path is? A P for pen tool. So if I hold down P, I get the pen tool. And I basically click and drag just like you do to create paths in Illustrator. I want you to know, I'll tell you some of my little habits that I have when I do this. I typically curve every anchor point that I create. I try to go for less anchor points, but in this case with the wrinkled paper, I'm getting a lot of them. And you know, basically kind of curve it but smooth it out at the same time. Now, right now you'll notice that the ants are still marching around the other part of the candy. I have left that selection area active because I'm going to show you something. I'm getting ready to load this path as a selection, but I can also load it and add to a selection. So we'll see that when I get into the paths palette. The more you get used to using these pen tools, the easier this becomes. And I don't need, since I've already got some of that selection already done, I don't need to do much more than that. I went all the way around and closed my path. And then I need to pull out the paths palette. I have set them over here. I've got layers, paths, color, and swatches. These are things that I might use on occasion. I'm going to hold down the path palette, and you can see work path here. I'm going to double click on where it says word path and type in candy, I'll call it candy 1, and hit OK. Now that path is named and I could get it back again. Down here in the paths palette there is a button, and if I float over it, you'll see what it says. It's load path as a selection. I could do that, but then I would lose the selection work that I've already done. In this case, I want to add to the selection, so while I hold down that button, I haven't done that yet, while I hold down that button or click on that button, I'm going to hold down Shift. And when I do that, it added to the selection area. Okay, so that is working with selections to this point. I'm going to copy this, Command C, and create a new doc. Brand new doc, and it says, it's over here, it's saying based on the clipboard. When I hit Command C, I copied the object to the clipboard, and it's about 348 pixels by 188 pixels at 72 pixels per inch. I'm working on low res here, just to give you a tutorial. I'm going to create this and then hit Command V, and it will paste my candy back in there. I'm going to come in closer so you can see that. Let's see the layers palette. In the layers palette, when I pasted that, I have the background layer that was here when I opened up the document, and then I have this layer that is a brand new piece of candy on a layer by itself. Now you'll notice that I don't have all of the wrapper from the candy here. I'm going to do a little bit of selection and surgery here with copying and pasting. First, I want to expand the canvas. I'm going to go to the image and under canvas size. See, I could resize the whole image by hitting image size. I could change it, enlarge it, or shrink it. But in this case, I want to expand the canvas. Before I do, over in the color and the tools bar over here, I'm going to flip the foreground and the background color so that when I create a more canvas area, it will have this background white area. And so I go to image, canvas size, and I'm looking at the inches. It says 4 inches by 2.5 inches, 4.8 by 2.5. I'm going to make it 6 by 4 inches just to give myself plenty of room. And when I OK that, it thinks about it for a minute. This object, the layer with the candy on it, is a free-floating object. If I hit V, I can grab this thing and move it around to wherever I want. I think what I'm going to do is select part of this other end of the candy wrapper and surgically remove it, copy it, paste it, surgically add it to this area up here. So in this case, I'll just get out the lasso tool again, and I'm guesstimating about how much I might want or need, and I select that area, hit Command C. Now when I hit Command V, I want you to watch the layers palette over here. Hit Command V, and a new layer shows up with the section that I pasted. So I'm going to move this selection. By the way, I moved it, and I don't even. You guys got to watch me, because I'll hit quick keys and not realize I did it. I hit V. Right now, I'm using V to manage the selection, and I want to rotate this and basically prepare it to be pasted into the rest of the candy. So what I do here is hit Command T for transform. And you'll see I get handles on the corners that are very similar to scaling handles that you've used in Illustrator. I rotate it, kind of guessing about as far as like where I really need it to be, and doesn't look like does not look like I'm going to have to do too much work to get this to work. I'm going to decide something about the size. There's a little bit of overlap here. Honestly, it's kind of difficult to see where my new piece and where the old piece exist, but if you look closely, you can see the edges here. You want to be mindful of things like that. People who are used to looking at these images will notice these seams. So in this case, in order to get rid of that extra seam here, in this ridge, I'm going to hit E for the eraser. Notice what activates over here, so I have to watch out. Right now, that eraser tool, I have to check and make sure I've got the right one. Yes, I do. Yeah, I've got all kinds of different tools with the flyouts. Most every one of these tools has a whole selection of different tools under that heading, and this one is under E. I'm going to erase. Now, when you get an eraser, it's a lot like a paintbrush. You should consider it that it's going to have a certain shape. And so here I'm going to change the size and the shape of this eraser. Right now it's kind of a soft size. That's a little bit too big. I'm going to reduce it. And what I do is I'm not erasing yet. I'm going to place my eraser halfway over that seam. I mean, if you saw it without the other layer below, I would put my eraser right about where the center of my eraser will pass over this seam. And we'll see what we get. And I'm erasing too much. So I'm going to reduce the size of that eraser. Also, I don't think it's soft. I want to make sure that it's a soft eraser. Normal brush mode, yes. Hardness 0. All right. Oh, no, that was a paintbrush. Of course, I'm doing a demo. It's got to do that. Let's see. E. I'll go for E on the eraser again and see if I can change out my brush. So if I select that, it went to the paintbrush. Nice demo, right? Let's see. Brush, turn, flow, smoothness, softness. It's still a hard edge. I love it when they change stuff. Let's go to, oh, I see. Here we go. We got a whole, it's because we have too many choices. So I picked a soft round edge, and I'm going across this with a little eraser. Yeah, you know, look, you think you know, it's okay. And of course, anytime you're going to make a mistake, it's going to be when you're doing a demonstration. No problem. Partly it's all the updates on the software. They change the interface a little bit each time. This brings me to an important point that I want to make sure you understand. You will learn these buttons, and then next year they change the buttons. So you need to be aware what the buttons are for and what the possible potential changes might be, so that you're not thrown off too far. Anyway, I'm pretty reasonably satisfied with that. Now, at this point, I've got a background layer. If I take that out, you can see that checkerboard pattern in the back that shows I've got, you know, clear background area here. I'm going to merge this layer down, layer 2, down onto layer 1. One way to do that is to go over to the layers palette, over to the menus, and you'll see that way down here it says you can merge down, or you can merge visible. In this case, because I only have 2 layers open, it would be the same thing. I'm just going to merge down, which is Command E. Now, if I zoom in on this, I want to look at these edges. If I zoom in, you see that there's a little bit of pixel sawtooth going on the edges here. I want to back this away. I'm going to select the outside area here. Oh, by the way, I'm going to introduce you to a new tool. It's called the wand, W. You hit W for the magic wand. And the way the wand works, the magic wand, it actually selects continuous areas of color. It looks for differences in pixels, and it will apply a selection based on differences in these pixels. I have a tolerance set up here in the bar, in the toolbar, that says 32. So it's based on a 32 pixel difference, which is pretty high. If I click here, because I had already used the lasso tool to select this, it's going to do a pretty good selection. Now, right now I have the background area selected. I don't have the candy selected. And what I want to do is invert the selection. So I will go to the menu, and I'll show you this, and then I'll tell you how I typically do it. I go to select, and right here it says inverse. I want you to know this. I know you guys know this, but I want you to pay attention. Every time you use a menu, if you look over to the right, after you find what you want to do, you notice it's got a key code here. It says Shift Command I. So I will get the same results if I want to inverse the selection by clicking on this button right here, or in this case, if I hit Command Shift and I, and it did the same thing. Now I've got the candy selected. I'm going to go and up onto select and do one more thing here. I'm going to soften this edge. I'm going to feather it. Let's see. So modify, border, smooth, expand. I think in this case I'm going to use smooth. And it asks me, if I'm going to smooth my selection, how far do I want to smooth it? I'm going to say 3 pixels, and say OK. And what it did was it moved in on my selection. Here, I'll zoom in on that. It moved in on my selection a little bit. So it's not. So there are pixels outside of that original selection area. And let's see. I want to see if there's anything else I want to do. Isolate. No. I will leave it as is. All right, so I've got this candy selected, and I'm going to back up, he said. I'm going to back up and copy it, Command C, and then I'm going to take it over into a building here. And you see this is another photo, and that's the background. I'm going to hit Command V, and I got a candy. Couple of things. It's upside down. I think I might want to turn it upside right. So I hit Command T, rotate it, and then move it up to where I would like it to be. It's something I notice. I don't know if you guys notice this stuff. The perspective on my candy is not the same as the perspective of the building. You probably could find a better, more exaggerated version of that, but I want to say, I'm going to be adding a few more pieces of candy to this. And I would like it to sort of match the perspective. So here's what I'm going to do. I am going to transform this candy and warp it a little bit. So what I do is I'm in Command T. If I hold down the Command key, it changes my cursor. When I go over a corner, it changes the cursor and allows me to stretch the candy to match the perspective of the environment that it's in. And it's a real subtle change in this case, but it really makes a difference as far as making it look like it's lying down on the surface here. And I will, once I have transformed with Command T, once you have transformed something and you like it, if you like it, you have to hit return in order to solidify the change. Let's zoom in on this. I'm going to hit Z again and click and drag to the right. Then it goes off my screen, so I hold down H to move it into the center. And it looks okay. There are a couple of details. There's probably a lot more detail that I can go into here. One thing that I could do to make this feel like it's really laying on the bricks instead of floating in front of it is I could lower the transparency of my layer. And that, that has its advantages and disadvantages. It desaturates the color, so you have to watch out for how much of that you're doing. Another way that I could do it is if I turn this into a, I'll experiment a little bit. If I turn this into a multiply layer, well, that's too dark. If I go for, let's see, difference, lighten. Let's see, difference. I don't know. Experiment around a little bit. I think using, in this case, using, we'll see, there you go. That's actually an attractive idea. I find it's kind of fun sometimes to get into the different functions and check out different effects and see what you want. I'm going to stick with normal in this case, and I am going to lower the opacity just a tiny bit to make it look like, so you can see a little bit of the ghosting of the bricks through there. There are other ways that I could enhance this. I could pick up the brick texture and move it to another layer and work with that, but we'll save that for a different tutorial. The last thing that I want to do to this candy at this point is I want to make it look like it fits into this column here. So what I'm going to do is, for the moment, I'm going to turn off the candy layer, and I'm going to select the brick column here. Now look, I could use the wand, and I'm gonna, if even with 32 pixels selected, there are so many different colors here, it's gonna be too much work. So I'm gonna undo that, and instead I'm gonna use the pen path tool again, and I'm going to select along this edge. And I selected a little bit more than I need, probably. And I'll come across there. Go to the paths palette again. I think I'll pull that out, and I will turn that into a selection area. Go back to the layers palette, and I'll actually roll that into that floating palette. Did you notice how you can pull the path menus out and use them together? And so it makes it easier if you're working over here. You can have your menu nearby where you're clicking. And I'm going to turn my layer back on. And now if I hit V and grab this, what happens is the selection turns into you can see a pair of scissors there. What it's actually going to do is cut. And in this case, what I'm going to do is move that up a little bit so that it skips. And then if I'm pretty sure that I like what I've got here, I'm going to hit Command H so that the ants disappear. I don't know if you noticed that. The first time you do that in Photoshop, it's going to ask you if you want to hide Photoshop or hide the extras. You want to hide the extras. All right, so that actually doesn't look too bad. I'm going to go back to my path and select it again and turn it into a selection. And then I'm going to invert the selection by holding down Command, Shift, and I to invert the selection. Now, this area is not selected, and everything outside this area is. And so in this case, just to get a quick result here, I'm going to sample the color of the brick by holding down I. I'm going to hit B for an airbrush, and I would like to see that airbrush. So let's see what I get. Oh, that's interesting. The cursor's not showing up. And it's way too big. I'm going to lower the size of that. There, now you can see it. That's why I couldn't see it. It was too big. All right, and I've lowered it a fair amount. I'm going to go up on a layer above this. Oh, it brings me to an idea. When in doubt, add a layer. If you're not sure you're going to like what you painted, add a layer. It gives you a lot of choices. Boy, I don't like that brown. That looks wrong on top of the blue. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sample the darkest blue by holding down I, clicking on I, and selecting into one of these areas on the candy. I'm going to paint a little bit there, and now I want to zoom in on this so you can see what I've done. Now I have overpainted. I want to make a correction. So here's what I'm going to do. This is my candy layer. I'm going to go back to the candy layer and hit Command D to deselect, and then hold down the wand, click on the wand, and it selects the area outside of the candy. And if I hit delete, not there, but on the layer above it, if I hit delete where I airbrushed, it will delete the excess. I keep Command O instead of Command 0. And I'm going to hit Command D to let that. So that kind of gives you a little bit of the illusion of that candy sitting in there, sitting down into that crevice there where the pillar is. Anyway, that's my lesson on selections. I hope I didn't go too long. I'll talk to you soon. He said that, and then he has to go close the program. Hang on a second.